Welcome back to Media7, where I'm discussing the issues facing the internet in New Zealand with Paul Reynolds, Rob O'Neill and Mark Rushworth. And Mark, it's you we're going to first. Pacific Fibre, your announcement got plenty of coverage. It seemed quite exciting. What difference is it going to make? Well,
the big difference we want to do is start to bring down to New Zealand and to Australia the concept of unlimited data caps. So, everyone in New Zealand's familiar where you get onto the internet at 7 o'clock at night and things come to a grinding halt. And that's because the amount of capacity that ISPs buy from the one cable that leaves New Zealand, in that case up to the US, the pricing on that. So we want to introduce some competition. We want to build another cable connecting Australia, New Zealand up to the US, where the majority of New Zealand's traffic goes to, and introduce competition into that marketplace. So where are you at now? Have you got any of that money in? Well, we've got the initial 6 founders on board that have put the business case together, and now we're going through the phase of working with potential carriers to establish what demand, what forecast they want, get letters of intent, work out what the right financing model is between debt and equity, and that's going to take a few months. And then once all that's done, the final build's about 2 years. So we hope to have the cable in 2013. Now the irony is that you used to run iHug after the Wood brothers were there, which was the company that introduced flat rate internet, where back in the dial-up days you could have all the internet you could eat for $30 a month. You could. And broadband has taken us away from that. Are you hoping that Pacific Fibre is going to be as disruptive as iHug was? Because it changed the industry. Well, it did, and that's one of the visions that we have. If you look just across at the UK, US, they all have unlimited data plans. And New Zealand, yes, we are geographically isolated, much like Australia, but with competition, we believe that we can bring that to the marketplace. And so, yes, disruptive play, if you like, what iHug did with dial-up, we want to do the same by bringing this big fat pipe down to New Zealand. So what are we going to do with all that bandwidth? Well, it's kind of funny. More porn and pirated movies? Well, you kind of think about, a highway. You have a 2-lane highway, it's full, you build a 6-lane, suddenly it gets filled. And we've got, the Australian government spending $42 billion on their fibre to the home, New Zealand government spending $1.5 billion. So there's going to be demand created, and applications that we haven't even thought about yet will come downstream. Rob, you serve the IT community through Computer World. Is there a demand there that you can see for that jump in international connectivity?
Yeah, maybe not right at the moment, but definitely, and all the projections are that the demand will be there in a few years' time. So by the time the cable arrives, it should be there. I mean, the explosion of video traffic on the internet, and we're not talking about porn all the time. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't, is enormous. And we'll be getting IPTV services. We'll be getting all sorts of services down that pipe. Whether it's through an iTunes store or through an Android store or whatever, there's all those things still to be developed. I think there's definitely going to be a need for more bandwidth. Which brings us back again, Paul, to your area, which is content.
Yeah, and I think that the content guys are really, if the bandwidth's there, then definitely there will be some great stuff. I mean, sure we'll be looking at a lot more video. I mean, but I believe it'll be a different kind of video. I mean, a simple little example is NZ on screen. You've got. You've got a lot of that archival footage coming up, and some of it is really very, very Kiwi stuff, and split ends, videos, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's really, really interesting. You've got the whole cultural sector, which is museums or libraries and galleries. I mean, those guys are just, if you see some of the international efforts in that thing, I mean, these are very rich interactive experiences. And I think the ability to make spaces, and that's especially true of libraries and museums, where instead of just this takeaway pass-through, give it to me on the way through, don't keep, everybody wants to be able to get something to go where, and it's like, where's the quiet contemplative space, And I think there's a big opportunity that we start building these spaces, and what we do in them is all yet to be done. It's like that lovely line, which I love re-quoting and re-quoting. The guy who put power into Reefton never saw an electric toaster. It's a great line, and it just tells us, well, our imagination will do this. And there are, of course, the controversies. ACTA, the trade agreement, and the filter. Rob, I'm going to tax you on both of those. Quite quickly, what are the issues there? Is our government doing well?
Well, ACTA is the anti-counterfeiting trade agreement. It's very hard to get a handle on whether the government's doing well because it's top secret. It's basically a treaty that will potentially cut across all sorts of local laws. So there's impacts on sovereignty. There's extreme concern that we don't know what's going in there. There was a briefing today in Auckland. I didn't manage to make it along, but I had somebody there. And, you know, there's all sorts of reassurances that it won't affect local laws, and then you get other people saying, well, if this draft is what we're going to get, then you have to change the law. And then the MED, Ministry of Economic Development, will say, well, actually, no, that's an old draft.
It's
so we just don't know what's going on.
I think one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is that we actually have a body arguing the user side of these copyright issues in Internet New Zealand. It seems to be filling quite a useful role now.
Yeah, and I think they've sprung back in the last couple of years. They didn't really have an issue, or they didn't get onto the issues quickly enough. And now, I think Section 92, they went very quick on that one, but they've really picked up their act and they're leading this one. And it's really, really welcome. So basically that's a treaty that was initially targeted at counterfeiting and seems to be migrating more into the copyright area. So it will affect citizens as opposed to...
And briefly, the filter, should we be worried?
Yeah, well, the filter is theoretically, it's benign. You know, it's to save us from, keep us safe online. The concern is that it's if you don't want a filtered service, it's a voluntary filter for the ISPs. ISPs can volunteer to have a filtered service.
And the idea is that it stops us accidentally finding things like child porn.
Which people don't
very
really
objectionable
do.
content.
Which people don't really do. I mean, you find child porn by going and looking for it, and it's not there really on the broader internet. It is there on the broader internet, but you have to be pretty unlucky to come across it, you know. That's not the medium for exchange for people who are into that kind of thing. So I think Internet New Zealand, again, leading on this one, they're talking about active choice. So people should be able to choose whether they're going to have a filtered service or an unfiltered service. Even though it's voluntary, it doesn't look like that's going to work out that way. Your ISP will choose for you, and then you either leave the ISP or stay with them.
So, like we said at the top of the show, big ideas are at stake this year. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That is all for this discussion, although I'm sure the internet itself will continue to surprise us. Thanks to Paul Reynolds, Rob O'Neill and Mark Rushworth. Now, Jose Barbosa forges further into the digital domain with a profile on concept designer and illustrator Greg Broadmoor.
There's one in every schoolroom. He's the kid who fills his exercise book full of dinosaurs and stickmen massacres instead of algebra and geography.
Back in the old days, they used to put kids like that on a ship and dump them at sea. But nowadays, they're sent here to Weta and put to work. One of those kids was Greg Broadmoor. He's worked as a designer on a number of films for Weta Workshop. All the bloody big ones, in fact.
You just put your skull there.
He's the man behind the Dr. Broadmoor line of ray guns and is the creator of a new comic book called Victory.
It's kind of like a science fiction annual of adventure and progress and destruction through our solar system, you know, through the eyes of Lord Coxswain, who is this great white hunter that goes forth into our solar system and subjugates the godless population of space.
Greg's art is powered by whatever concerns or fancies are rattling around in his head at the time. But I think he does his best work when he's focusing on machinery. His robots are powerful, but also vulnerable. In fact, he's behind one of the best designed robots to be seen in recent cinema, namely the exosuit Vicus takes refuge in at the end of District 9.
I designed that particular creature completely twice. One of them was actually built as a real prop that Shalto Copley, who played Vicus, actually stood in on set, and that was edited out of the film at the end, and I had very quickly, in the course of about 2 weeks or so, redesign a new one from scratch.
Looking at Victory, it's clear this is a guy who grew up on the seminal British anthology 2000 AD, the home of Judge Dredd.
He was just this thug. He's like a fascist thug, and yet you wanted to read about him, and he was like this powerful, heroic character. But he's not someone you're supposed to idealise. In fact, you know, I think that's what's interesting, that it makes you, the writers make you like and not empathise with, but revel in the actions of a character who's definitely engineered to make you dislike him.
And of course, films were a big part of the young Greg's creative life.
Science fiction classics, you know, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and Aliens and Alien, RoboCop, you know, all that stuff, Predator. You know, stuff from the 80s. More violent, the better as I got older. RoboCop was a particular film that stuck with me. My design sense is not, and my sort of aesthetic sense is not defined by any one thing. It's, you know, it's the sum of all your experiences, and that's massively varied. You know, I mean, I'm inspired by when I walk down the road and I see a digger or a piece of excavating equipment, and I geek out on that.
So that's Greg Broadmoor, a kid who grew up doing exactly what he always wanted to do, drawing awesome robots and sweet-looking dinosaurs. Lucky bastard.
And that is our show for this week. If you'd like to know more about the issues we've discussed, you'll find some useful links in the Media7 blog. Thanks to our guests and to you for watching. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.